Well, I must say that's not normally how I'm introduced, but I feel normal here with all of you because you are evidently all not normal like me, so we're all in good company. And the fact is, we are different from the people that live around us, and so that brings us to week 4 of what we've been talking about, how we live in the world that maybe is much different than it was when we were growing up many years ago. It's much different than it was maybe in 1851 when people thought differently, lived differently, had different morals, values, attitudes towards life, attitudes towards each other, and even their attitudes towards the whole world in which we live regarding God. And maybe they weren't all agreeing on exactly which God or which translation of the Bible or even what religion, but it was much more of a religious place where you may be able to engage a little bit easier in a conversation with people about biblical ideals, about concepts, about Jesus, about salvation, because you know that in our world there are people that are growing up, they never had a Bible in the home. They never went to church. They never talked about God. As a matter of fact, whenever they talked about something big, it was not God. Everything was not God. So there's a lot of people that even to bring up the subject is quite foreign to them, to think about it. As opposed to, when I was growing up, most people had some kind of a connection with a church. Maybe it was when they were growing up, they went to Bible school with grandma, or they, went to a VBS, or they had Christian friends, or sometimes some concepts were even taught in school. But today, there are people that, are just completely ignorant about those things. Now, there are other people that maybe grew up with a concept of God, a little bit of teaching about biblical principles, maybe even went to church. But then after a while of them being in school and then university, they were talked out of the idea that there is a God, that there's a higher power, that there's any kind of accountability, that the Bible is even reliable. And so now they believe in a whole system where it excludes God in every way. And so that kind of brings us to, well, how do we share our faith? And a couple of weeks ago, we talked about what it would be like living in Athens, trying to at least even get a conversation going, to make a transition from maybe where people are at to a place where we could actually talk about the good news of Jesus Christ with them, about some historical facts, about things that are true, about some things that are even going to happen in the future, all these things that are involved in how we live, the choices we make, even our own attitudes, maybe our own morality, not only what we think and believe, but what we're going to teach to our own children. And so it becomes, maybe we would say, increasingly difficult to put all these things together. And so today, this is probably the last time I'm going to talk about it for a while, but today it's just called painful evangelism. Now, you may think I'm talking about, well, it's sometimes very painful just to be able to share our faith. I mean, to figure out the best way to do it, and what am I going to say, and how are they going to counter it, all this. How's it even going to work out? And so maybe we're a little bit fearful. I don't know if I should even bring it up, at least maybe not right now. So evangelism can be painful. But don't worry, because I'm sure the people you're talking to, they kind of look in your eye and go, man, this is really painful for them to bring it up. So maybe it's painful. I'm just kidding. Of course they would never think that. They would think, obviously, this person is just sharing the depths of their heart. But anyway, but I'm not really talking about as painful as it can be, because last week, if you remember, we talked about the Philippian jailer where there was a lot of painful evangelism. And the pain was coming from Paul and Silas being beaten with rods, thrown into jail, and all of that happening. So they went through a lot of pain. Maybe it was through what they're suffering that people took notice. A jailer responded, and he wanted to know what this was all about. What must I do to be saved? So there was a lot of pain in that. And, I do get emails throughout the week, but I never got any emails this week of somebody saying, this week I was out and I got beaten by rods and I was thrown into jail. Maybe you didn't send the email. Anybody like that? Well, yeah, that probably didn't happen to us, at least not here in America this week. So maybe there's not that kind of persecution, but maybe there is opportunity to engage in people's lives, not necessarily just when we're going through pain, Although sometimes when we do go through pain, people know, well, how are they going to respond? What are they going to do? What are they going to turn to? What's their attitude going to be? Right? I mean, are you going to act just like people in the world would? Like, for instance, Paul says, even at the end of life, he says, we don't grieve like people who have no hope. We have hope. We have something even beyond death. So we don't grieve like, now it doesn't say we don't grieve at all, does it? It says we don't grieve like them. Yeah, there's still some grief and pain and sorrow, but there's also something beyond. There's hope, right, for the future. But sometimes it's the pain that other people have. Maybe that's the thing that sometimes are going to make people think, I need something in my life. There's got to be something else. Where can I find hope? Where can I find peace? Where can I find something that can settle my worried heart? What am I going to do? Where am I going to turn? So sometimes people face a loss of a job. Maybe they might face going to the doctor and finding out they have cancer. Or maybe they find out that, they've lost all their life savings. Maybe people are involved in some kind of an addiction and an internal struggle they're having. And then there's a relationship issues, maybe even divorce. There's a lot of pain that people can go through in their life. And sometimes they look for something, at least to help them through. And I think that's part of what Paul was getting at. A lot of times we read 2 Corinthians chapter 1. Actually, we let Richard read it today, 2 Corinthians chapter 1. And there it's talking about sometimes we go through pain, and it has a secondary purpose. I don't think God's like, okay, I'm going to put you through pain just for this. But when we do go through pain, that enables us to help other people who are going through a similar situation or circumstance in their life. Something that we can do because we can share in their pain because we've been through it or been through something very similar. Now, 2 Corinthians chapter 1 seems to be talking about when I go through the pain, I can minister to you as fellow believers, right? That we're in this together, and this is what Paul is saying to them. But it's also something we can share in with people that are even non-Christians, that are maybe looking for something. They're looking for some strength. They're looking for something for their hurting heart. They're looking for something, not necessarily make everything make sense, but at least help me through this challenge. So they're looking for something. In our way of talking, sometimes it would be like the prodigal son. Now, the prodigal son, if we're going to put it in a modern-day vernacular, grew up in a Christian home, and then he left that for a long time. You remember he took his money, his father's money really, half of what was coming to him. He left, went out, and he lived a very sinful life apart from the father, apart from a relationship with the father, and probably wasn't even thinking about the father. He was estranged from it was just the father was dead to him. But what happened? He was going through a painful situation in his life. He had nobody. He had no friends. He had no job. He had no income. And here he was, and what's he thinking? He's thinking, I need something. There's got to be something better. And so he, because he had a past, could think, I need to go back to the Father. Now, today, some people may not even have that kind of a past, so they need us to be there maybe to say, you know where you can go with your struggle and your pain and your hurt and your sorrow and your tears? You know where you can go? You can go to a father. And then he said, well, my father wouldn't want to hear anything about this. Well, that's not the father I'm talking about, right? There's a father that you can go to. And so this is what Paul is trying to explain in 2 Corinthians chapter 1. So God is the one, our Father is the one full of compassion. Again, that reminds us of the prodigal son. The prodigal son thinks, I can go to my father because he's a good man. He's a kind man. And I know that even by the way he treats those people that serve him, those people that are under him. He's a good man. But this is our God. God is full of compassion, and he's the God of all comfort. And so Paul's saying, I've experienced this in my life. I want to remind you of it. So is there something in that we can do to help other people? There's a God. And maybe just read this verse, right? God is the Father of compassion and comfort. I mean, they may not even know who God is, but here we are just getting started on who the character and the nature of God for people that are going through hard times. And God is the one who comforts us in all of our troubles. See, and again, that sounds pretty inclusive, doesn't it? He comforts us in all of our, not just some of them. It's not like, oh, God can take care of maybe a relational issue, but he can't take care of your fear or your finances, or he can't even really take care of your marriage because he doesn't know that much about that, or he can't help with that. No, he can help whatever the struggle, whatever the pain, whatever the difficulty in life. God can help us. He can comfort us in whatever the trouble is. You can't name a problem that God says, well, that's beyond me. I don't know what to do here. I'm not going to help you. He's going to help us. But he does that, and this is what I would say is the secondary. I mean, God doesn't just help us so we can help others, but it's a secondary benefit. He helps us, so we do get the peace, the comfort, the strength that we find in God, but he does that so that we can comfort other people. So what does it say? We can comfort those in most troubles, some troubles, a few troubles, limited troubles, like any trouble. We go through something so we can share in other people's trials. We can share in their life. Now, we have to be willing to do that. That's the challenge, right? Because again, sometimes it can be messy. Sometimes it can be time-consuming. Sometimes, it can even be painful for us to have to go through all of that again for the sake of somebody else. But we can do that. And it means that we are going to have to sacrifice some of our own time, some of our own trouble, some of our own struggles so that we can help someone else. Because, and this is the last part of the verse, because we've already received it. It's kind of, we think about the gospel. In Matthew chapter 10, Jesus says, freely you've received, freely give. Just as you've received it, we should be free in giving it to other people. That's the good news of the gospel. This is kind of saying, as freely as we've received the comfort of God, we should be willing freely, and he's not talking about without cost. It's like, well, I'll help you, but it's going to be like $35 an hour, right? He's not saying that, but we should do it because we want to. It's a free gift, right? It's not because there's not money attached to it. It's because we freely want to give of ourselves. Because God has been so open and generous and bounteous to us. In other words, he's just not given us a little bit of comfort. He's given us all the comfort. Everything that we've need, everything that we've accepted, it's all come from him. So, well, if I've received it from him, then I can give it to others. And so I think that's a way that we can touch people's lives in the areas where they're hurting. And maybe that's where the impact of the gospel really changes people. Now, we know that maybe one of the powerful ways it changes people, even in a quick way, is when that they know what their sin is, right? So there may be somebody that's suffering from an addiction, or they've even suffered from consequence of a sin, right? So somebody may have really messed up their marriage. Now they're in a divorce, and now they're very sorrowful, and they regret a lot. And so how can we help them to bring them peace and strength and, again, hope for the future? What's the answer to their problem? The answer is the gospel. The answer is Jesus Christ. Not that he's going to fix everything, but even if their marriage never gets back together, he's going to give them strength day by day, right? Or maybe God is going to transform their life, and that's happened many times where people have acted in a very ungodly way to their spouse, get a divorce, that person changes, and then the spouse goes, wow, different person. Now, they may not accept that in the first day, but after you've lived as a changed person for months or even years, sometimes that spouse says, wow, that's somebody who I want to be married to. Didn't do too good the first time, but they're a changed person. So even God can heal strained relationships, bad marriages, broken families. God can do this because this is the God who we serve. And so that's got to be good news to people that want to change life. They want a new beginning. They want strength for tomorrow. And so here's one way that we can share the gospel with people who may not even know God. They will know him eventually. They'll know him as we go along. So he says there in verse 5 and 6, for just as we share abundantly in the sufferings of Christ. And so here again, I think he's talking about the persecution he's gone through so that he can even preach the gospel. And we see that a lot in the book of Acts, what Paul suffered. And we talked about that last time. Later on in 2 Corinthians chapter 11, he kind of gives a whole list there of what he had suffered because he was preaching. But our sufferings are abundant, but our comfort is also abundant. It abounds through Christ. And if we're distressed, Paul's saying we're going through a struggle, it's for your comfort. That's why we're going through it. And Paul literally meant that. Paul basically is saying, I could have stayed in Jerusalem, and maybe things would have been easier there. I'm kind of getting on in age. I certainly can retire, just like you guys do in America. I'm not sure if people retired in the first century, but anyway, he can say, I'm just not going to go through all of this anymore. I want an easy job. I want to find a small church somewhere where everybody seems to get along, and we're just going to sit and we're going to rest on our laurels. That's kind of what we used to say. In other words, we're going to say, boy, them's were the good old days, but I'm not doing anything anymore, because you get into a lot of trouble. You get problems, But no, he's saying, I continue to go out and to preach, and I'm willing to, I know what's ahead of me. I know how people are going to react. I've done this long enough. If we're distressed, it's for your comfort and salvation. And if we're comforted, it's for your comfort. And so Paul's saying, I'm willing to continue to suffer. And he goes, we are under great pressure, far beyond our ability to endure, so that we are despaired of life itself. Which is kind of interesting. We kind of think that, we read the book of Philippians, we think Paul's, he's just happy all the time. He's got a great outlook on life. He's Mr. Positive. He's like the outgoing preacher who everybody loves, and he never has any troubles or struggles in his life. He's saying here, I despaired even life itself. It sounds like he's a little bit discouraged. I mean, some people would say, maybe even on the verge of wishing he was dead, or we would say on the verge, maybe, not that he's going to commit suicide, but it's like, man, I just kind of wish that it was over now. That's pretty discouraging. I mean, it's a good thing that nobody else in North America goes through depression or discouragement or things like this today. Oh, but hang on, but we do. A lot of people do. And Paul's saying, I went through that. And I can relate to you when you're struggling. And I know sometimes, maybe even in church, we don't like talking about that. Right? Because in church, sometimes we want to say, and excuse me for talking about myself too much, because that's the attitude I have. So, everything's fine. It's like, nothing's fine right now. Oh, praise the Lord. I've been so blessed. Right? But inside, it's like, well, it's not quite that way. And quite frankly, there's a time and place for it, right? I mean, maybe now it's not. Do you guys have a couple hours that I can just kind of share a little bit? See, maybe not the time and place, but maybe there's a time and place where we can talk about, how I'm really feeling. But this is what Paul's saying. I can relate to people, right? Because I've been through it. Indeed, we felt we'd received the sentence of death, but this happened that we may not rely on ourselves, but on God who raises the dead. And so Paul's saying, I had to learn these lessons myself, and I want you to learn them. As a matter of fact, I even want the non-Christians to learn these lessons. That, sometimes life is such a struggle, we don't even know where to turn. But we can trust in God, because God's faithful, God's going to be with us, and God, at the very end here, says, hey, he's all-powerful. He raised Christ from the dead. And if he can raise Christ from the dead, he can handle my small problems. I mean, because my problem is small compared to raising somebody from the dead, right? God can handle it. He can figure it out. He can give us strength. He's going to see us through. He's going to give us hope for tomorrow. And we can share that now with other people because we go through pain and struggles and suffering and heartache and challenges and sometimes even addiction to sin in our own lives. And we say, hey, I can help other people through their struggles. Now it is God who makes both us and you stand firm in Christ. And he anointed us. He set a seal of ownership on us. He's put a spirit in our hearts as a deposit guaranteeing what is to come. So God's taken care of it. He's given us what we need. And this is something we can share. We can bless other people. We can encourage other people. We can give other people hope. But this is found in the gospel. And again, it's not just found in saying, hey, let's just have a prayer, everything's going to be okay. It's like being in a relationship, right? Again, we come back in our own minds to the prodigal son. He could have been out there, feeding the pigs and thought, well, I could go back to my dad. So why don't I just sit here and in my mind say, my dad's a good guy. I really like him. I hope I can have the spirit of fatherhood in my life. But he didn't do that. That's not really going to help. What does he need to do? He needs to go up, get up, walk back home, go back to his dad, get back in the house, get back in the relationship, get back in the family, do what you need to do, right? And so, we don't just end with, and sometimes that's the challenge that we have, right? Someone says, I'm really struggling. Why don't I say a prayer for you? What, is everything going to be okay just because I say a prayer for them? Or could it be better for me to say, can we talk about what the solution is? Let's have a prayer, and then we can talk about a solution. And the solution is the relationship. It's the relationship with God. And I know I've probably said that before, but that's a struggle I have whenever I do a funeral for someone that's not a Christian. So once in a while, the funeral home calls me up and says, we've got somebody here that, doesn't have anybody else to call. Could you do the funeral? And I'm thinking, if they're calling me and I'm a minister of the gospel, I'm coming with my Bible. I'm not just going to come and say some nice words and say a little prayer. I'm coming with a message from God's word, right? So I want to share something with them. Generally, what I share with them is kind of a detailed explanation of Psalm 23. If you remember, maybe a few years ago, I did, was it 6 weeks or 7 weeks on Psalm 23? So you could think, well, there's probably a good 4 hours. I don't usually spend 4 hours in the funeral home. I do it in just a few minutes. But my key thing with this, with the Lord Shepherd, is God can bless you. But you got to be one of the sheep. You got to follow him. You just can't say, God bless me today, and then we forget about him tomorrow. It's about the relationship between the sheep and the shepherd. Everybody loves Psalm 23. It sounds so beautiful. But people have no idea how to apply that. And I'm not saying us here. I'm talking about people in the world have no idea how to apply that to their lives. Right? You got to be in a relationship with the shepherd. That's what the whole thing is. Hearing his voice, following him. He's the one who's going to lead you and guide you. And he's the one who's going to save you. He's going to, lead you through the valley of the shadow of death, through the wilderness, through the challenges, through the heartaches. And in the end, what's he going to do? He's going to, take you to the place everlasting. Right? There I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Who doesn't want to do that? If there's a house out there you got to dwell in, I want to live in the good house. I don't want to live in the hell house. So live in that. Everybody wants that. Well, it just doesn't come from wishful thinking. It doesn't come because you read it once in a while. It comes because you have a relationship. So this is kind of what it's talking about, that God is going to strengthen us and we can stand because God is able to make us stand. Right? He's going to give us the solid foundation. He's going to give us the strength that we need in our legs and in our feet and the balance we need so that we don't fall over. He's going to give us the ability to walk wherever he leads. And so he's the one who strengthens us. So this is where our assurance comes from in Hebrews chapter 4 and verse 15, because this is talking about Jesus. We're talking about following Jesus, receiving strength from him. Well, what does he know about the struggles that I have? What does he know about my problems? What does he know about heartache and difficulty? And what does he know about, dealing with these foolish people we have at work that are just so hard to get along with? What does he know about any of that? Well, apparently he knows quite a bit. All you have to do is read the Bible and say, what did Jesus go through? Right? Well, he even went through people, that lied about him. He went through people that made false accusations against him. He went through a dysfunctional family. You know whose family it was? It was his family. Sometimes his mother and his own brothers and sisters misunderstood him. And, they seemed to be estranged, not necessarily his mom, but the brothers and sisters, They weren't together. They weren't on the same page. They weren't working in the same direction. Right? So he had his struggles. He had a struggle with trying to teach people. They just didn't understand. They didn't get it. They weren't listening. He had people that would quite often try to trick him up, try to trap him, try to get him to say things. He went through sorrow of seeing a lot of people that were ill, that were abused, and people that were dead, right? So he went through a lot of sorrow and challenges and issues in his life. So he knows what it's like to go through that. Because sometimes you read, Jesus was disappointed. Jesus was sorrowful. Jesus cried, right? Jesus had pain in his heart. Jesus kind of was like, who around here has any faith, right? Where are you people, right? So he went through frustration. He went through pain in seeing how even back then the religious leaders were abusing and misusing people for their own personal gain. He went through a lot of struggles. So this is what it says here. He can, and listen to what it says about Jesus, because the idea is maybe we could do that too, can't we? That we can empathize with people's weaknesses. Because we've been tempted in every way. We've been through struggles. We've been through pain, right? Now the difference is that we've sinned. We know what it is to fall. We know what it is to stumble. And so we can help other people. But Jesus wants to help us. Maybe Jesus wants us to help others. They need help. They're looking for something. And so we can be that intercessor to bring them to Jesus. And let us then approach God's throne of grace with confidence so that we may receive mercy and find help in our time of need. That's what we want for ourselves. Maybe we can offer that to others that don't yet know this is even available. They don't know the power of prayer. They don't know the strength in the relationship. They don't even know what it is to come to a church and take communion. I mean, even if they went to church and took communion, it probably wouldn't mean anything to them. They don't understand. But they may learn, they may grow, they may develop a relationship, right? And so could we be like that so that they also can approach the throne of God, the throne of grace with confidence, and to find that mercy and the grace to help in the time of need? Can we offer that to people through their pain and their sorrow? Again, not everybody's going to want it, so there's no doubt about that. But some people, that's when they're ready to listen. That's when their heart is going to be open. That's when they're going to consider, baby, there's got to be more to life than what I've been living. And there's got to be something that's going to help me even through the struggles that I have. And so Paul, again, talks about his pain, his suffering, and yet the comfort that he found in God. And so in 2 Corinthians chapter 12, he talked about the thorn in the flesh. He prayed 3 times to God, would you take this away from me? He's really saying it's too painful for me. I think Paul had a lot of issues and struggles in his life, but there was something that was really big. And he's saying, I could do better, I could be better, I could live better, I could be stronger. Just take this. It sounds like it's just one thing, this thorn in the flesh, take it from me. But look what God said. In order to keep me from being conceited, for me to think it's all on me, I can do it, I'm the strong person, I'm self-motivated, it's my type A personality, I can just handle the world, it's all about me. Because everybody, well, not everybody, just the church. Oh, no, not everybody in the church. But some people think I'm okay. So you think, well, is he really that good? Paul said, no, I'm not that good, I know that. And God wanted to remind me of that. So he sent me a messenger, Satan, to torment me, and 3 times he pleaded to the Lord to take it away. And so this is in Paul's life to help him from being proud, to think that he is self-sufficient or even all-sufficient. No. What does he realize? He realizes that the power comes from God. So God said to him, my grace is sufficient. My grace is enough. Yeah, you still have this pain, this challenge, this difficulty, this what seems to be an impassable, unsurmountable obstacle in your life, but my grace is bigger than that. My grace can cover that. My grace is going to be with you because my power is made perfect in weakness. And what did Paul do? He used that so he could minister to other people. He used it so that, he didn't have to think, well, I can't relate to these people because I'm strong. It's all of me. He's saying, I have to rely on God's grace just like you do. I have to pray for God's strength in my life just like you do. I need to realize I am weak just like we all are. We're in this together. And so we can encourage and build up, and strengthen, and pull each other along sometimes. Do whatever we can because we are in this together. And so we share this common thing not only with ourselves in the church, but now with other people. And so the song of encouragement or invitation is the song, I Love to Tell the Story. And so it's a great story to tell. But what is it a story of? What's the story about? It's about salvation. It's about healing. It's about transformation. It's about a new life. It's about somewhere to go with pain and sorrow and suffering. It's where I take my sins and my guilt and my shame. It's where I find power to live for today and for tomorrow. Where I can find healing not only physically, but even emotionally and relationally, maybe even mentally, spiritually. It's all in Christ. It's a great story that we're a part of. We need to love to tell the story to other people so they can share in the same story that we are a part of, the story of Jesus. If we can encourage you today in your relationship, maybe today you have never been baptized into Christ and you want to be a part of his story, you want to be a part of his family, you want to be in the Lord's house. I'm not talking about the church building, I'm talking about the Lord's house. Just like the prodigal son went home to the Father. And if today you want to come to the Father, become a child of his, we encourage you to be baptized into Christ. And if we can be a blessing, we'll stand, we'll sing this song, and let's know how we can encourage you this morning.